Welcome to this explainer on CISSP Domain 2.0. We're going to build that executive mindset you absolutely need to master asset security. As an expert CISSP instructor, I can tell you right now, this domain makes up roughly 10% of your exam. But honestly, in the real world, this is all about protecting information from cradle to grave. Data isn't just bits on a hard drive, right? It's the literal lifeblood of an organization. Managing it properly is a massive legal and financial responsibility. So let's dive right in.
Okay, we're going to break this down across 6 core modules: classifying assets, handling requirements, data destruction, data retention, privacy tech, and finally, governance roles.
Module 1. Identifying and classifying assets.
So the journey starts with knowing exactly what you have and figuring out its true value. You literally cannot protect what you haven't identified. We're talking sensitive stuff like PII, personally identifiable information like social security numbers, or PHI, protected health information. Now notice how we handle classification depending on the sector. Government classifications like top secret tie directly to national security. I mean, if top secret data is breached, the definition is literally exceptionally grave damage to the nation. But flip over to commercial schemes with labels like confidential or proprietary, and they focus purely on organizational business impact, loss of revenue, and losing that competitive edge. Bottom line for you as a security pro, your asset classification always dictates the level of protection you apply.
Now, regardless of the classification scheme, data fundamentally lives in 3 distinct states, and you guessed it, each needs specific cryptographic protection. First up, data at rest. This is stored on physical media, and it absolutely requires strong symmetric encryption. If a drive is stolen, you want those contents completely unreadable. Then we have data in transit. This is data actively moving across a network, and it relies heavily on secure protocols like TLS to stop eavesdroppers in their tracks. Finally, data in use. This is when data is actively being processed in RAM. Here is a vital rule for the exam. Applications have to be programmed to flush those memory buffers once the data is no longer needed. If they don't, attackers can use memory dump exploits to scrape highly sensitive, unencrypted data right out of the RAM.
Module 2. Information handling requirements.
All right, once classified, your assets have to be handled securely for their entire lifespan to prevent accidental exfiltration or a totally devastating data breach. To get that strict, undeniable control, you might use air gapping. This is literally cutting the cord, true physical isolation, where a classified network has zero physical or logical connection to an unclassified one. And for backups, you absolutely need geographic diversity. Don't put your primary data center and your backup in the same city, where one hurricane could wipe out both. You also need data loss prevention, or DLP. Network DLP is like an automated guard at your perimeter, blocking sensitive outgoing emails, while endpoint DLP lives right on a user's laptop to stop an insider threat from just plugging in a USB drive and walking out with proprietary schematics.
And that brings us to a massive CISSP exam mindset note. Write this down. Data collection limitation is your ultimate safeguard. Think about it from a sheer liability standpoint. If you don't have a crystal clear, justifiable business purpose for collecting a piece of data, just don't collect it. Excess data isn't a valuable asset, it's a liability waiting to be breached. You simply cannot lose, and you cannot be sued for what you do not have.
Module 3. Data remnants and destruction.
Well, eventually all assets reach the end of the line, and this introduces the serious danger of data remnants. That's the residual magnetic flux, or slack space, left behind even after you think a file has been permanently deleted. For the exam, you need to clearly separate these destruction methods because the security levels vary wildly. Erasing, that just removes the file directory pointers. The actual data is still sitting right there on the disk, completely recoverable. Clearing is a step up. It overwrites addressable locations with random bits, meaning you can reuse the media within the exact same security environment. Purging is a much more intense clearing process, so you can reuse the media in a completely different, less secure environment. Then there's degaussing. This exposes the media to a powerful electromagnet, totally destroying the magnetic fields. But for the absolute highest security, physical destruction. Incineration, pulverizing, shredding, that's the ultimate guarantee.
Actually, scratch that. Let's talk about a huge exam trap: solid-state drives, or SSDs. Because SSDs use integrated circuitry and super complex wear-leveling algorithms instead of traditional spinning magnetic platters, degaussing is completely 100% ineffective. A magnet does absolutely nothing to a flash memory chip. So to truly sanitize an SSD and kill any data remnants threat, physical destruction using an NSA-approved disintegrator is the absolute gold standard.
Module 4. Asset and Data Retention.
But what if you aren't legally allowed to destroy the data yet? That is where record retention policies come in. These ensure you keep data strictly as long as legally required for compliance or tax purposes. And here's the kicker. Keeping it even one day longer introduces massive legal liabilities during e-discovery in a lawsuit. Think about Boeing's famous legal case. They had 14,000 forgotten backup tapes just sitting in storage. When they were sued, they were legally compelled to painstakingly restore and analyze those ancient tapes at an unbelievable forensic cost, leading directly to a $92.5 million settlement. Do not hoard data.
And when we talk about hardware and software retention, you have to know the difference between end of life and end of support. End of life, or EOL, just means the vendor stopped selling the product. They're usually still patching it though. But end of support, or EOS, that is the day the vendor completely stops providing security patches. That's when your risk goes through the roof. Running an operating system or a firewall past its EOS date means the very next vulnerability discovered will be unpatched forever, leaving your environment wide open.
Module 5. Advanced Protection in Privacy Tech.
Okay, so modern assets aren't just locked in a basement anymore, right? They're heavily decentralized, up in the cloud, and governed by strict privacy laws like GDPR. This means we need advanced tools. We use digital rights management, or DRM, to protect intellectual property. DRM handles localized licenses, persistent online authentication, and even automatic expiration dates, basically making a document self-destruct after a set time frame. Then we have CASB, Cloud Access Security Brokers. A CASB sits right between your on-premise users and the cloud providers. It enforces internal security policies and hunts down shadow IT. You know, when employees quietly start using unauthorized SaaS apps and totally bypass the IT department's oversight. Now, when handling sensitive structured data, like credit card payments, we rely heavily on tokenization. Think about buying a coffee. Tokenization swaps the real credit card data for a random string of characters, the token. The actual sensitive card data is sent straight to a highly secure third-party vault during registration. So when you tap your card for that coffee, the retail point-of-sale system only handles that harmless token. The payment processor checks the token against the vault to validate the sale. This means the merchant never even stores the real credit card number, which drastically drops their compliance scope.
For the exam, make sure you compare these major privacy tools. Pseudonymization replaces sensitive data with an alias, and it's completely reversible if you hold the cryptographic key. Tokenization, like we just saw, uses a vault and is reversible, but only by that specific third party managing the vault. Anonymization, though, that permanently strips all identities and linkages. Because those links are completely destroyed, anonymization is theoretically impossible to reverse. That makes it the absolute strongest privacy mechanism when you want to use large datasets for statistical research without breaking privacy regulations.
Module 6. Governance, Roles, and Baselines.
So none of this life cycle management matters without absolute, undeniable accountability. Let's lock in these governance roles. The data owner is usually a senior executive like a CEO. They hold ultimate legal liability and officially define the classification level of the data. The system owner handles the actual hardware and system integration where the data lives. The data controller dictates the core business purpose and the lawful means of processing the data, while data processors are usually third parties who execute computational tasks strictly on behalf of the controller. Finally, we have the custodians. These are your hands-on IT folks doing the day-to-day implementation, taking the rules set by the data owner and actually running the backups.
Once you have the roles set, organizations apply comprehensive security baselines, like the NIST SP 800-53 framework. But baselines aren't just plug and play out of the box. They require adjustment. Here is the key distinction you need to know. Scoping eliminates controls that just do not apply to your environment. If your building has no wireless networks, scoping means you completely delete all Wi-Fi security controls from your compliance checklist. Tailoring, on the other hand, modifies existing controls to perfectly fit your organizational mission. It's like taking a baseline requirement for an 8-character password and tailoring it to 12 characters because your specific threat landscape demands higher security.
Protecting all these assets takes constant vigilance and a true, unwavering executive mindset. It's really like a lighthouse securely guiding ships through totally unpredictable waters. Every classification decision you make, every single handling requirement you enforce, and every destruction protocol you oversee acts as that beam of light, keeping your organization safe off the rocks of a catastrophic breach.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one vital question to test your own organizational readiness. If a massive data breach happens tomorrow morning, do you know exactly who holds ultimate legal liability in your company? And is that terabyte of retained redundant data sitting idle on your servers an actual business asset, or is it just a massive legal trap waiting to be sprung? Definitely something to think carefully about. Catch you next time.